Good morning and welcome to Inquirer Live. I'm Trudy Rubin. I write the Worldview column for the Inquirer, and today it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce Ambassador Oksana Markarova, Ukraine's ambassador to the USA, and the diplomatic face of her country as Ukraine battles incredibly bravely and toughly in defense of its country against an unprovoked Russian invasion. This discussion couldn't be more timely. I look forward to speaking with her about how Ukraine can win the war. A few details that you probably don't know about the ambassador. She was Minister of Finance for 5 years before coming to Washington in 2021. And she also spent 17 years working in private equity and holds an MPA in public finance from Indiana University. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping details. At any time during the discussion, you can submit questions for the ambassador in the comments section at the bottom of this page. And if you're watching from social media, please visit inquirer.com/live to submit your questions. With that, let's get started. Madam Ambassador, only yesterday we saw President Biden and President Macron of France at the White House talking about the possibility of talking to Putin. President Biden said he would do it, but only if Putin indicates he's, quote, looking for a way to end this war. And of course, President Putin's spokesman said that would only happen if Ukraine or if the United States recognized Russia's, I will add the word fake, annexation of 4 Ukrainian provinces. Tell us how you regard those remarks by Biden and Macron yesterday. Is this the time when there can be talks or should be talks with Putin?
Well, Trudy, thank you so much for having me. I enjoy reading all your columns, and it's a pleasure to talk to you with you and with the audience today. Let's focus on what was main in the remarks and the focus on Ukraine of both presidents and the strategic leadership of the United States in supporting Ukraine now. And we have heard again yesterday that the US, together with France, together with other G7, together with G7 plus partners, will stay the course with Ukraine and will support us as long as it takes. And I think this is the main message which we have to focus on. And that message is supported by specific deeds also. We are receiving support from President Biden, from Congress on a very strong bipartisan basis, from American people in general. And that support in terms of security assistance and financial budgetary support, but also sanctions against Russia is very important for us to win this war. So talking to Putin, I mean, you know that after 2014, 2015, when Ukraine had to sign the Minsk Accords, and even though they were not particularly fair to Ukraine, we tried to implement them to the T while Russia was violating them all the time. For 8 years before this reinvasion, we tried to use diplomatic path, regardless of how hard it was, to restore our territorial integrity and to get to lasting peace. But Russia used all that time to prepare for this attack. So will we talk ever to Russia? Of course, you know, when they stop the war, get out from our country, when they return all of our citizens, and when justice is served, of course we will talk to Russia. But do we see the signs that Russians are ready to talk now? We don't see those signs. And I think there, you know, we heard it also loud and clear from our partners and from President Biden always, that Russians have to stop this war. They are the only ones actually who can stop this war, because unlike some difficult situations or difficult conflicts, this one is pretty straightforward. We are a peaceful country that never attacked Russia, never attacked anyone. They simply attacked us in 2014, and they again started a full-fledged war on February 24th.
So basically, what you are saying is that Ukraine doesn't believe it's possible to talk with Putin before the Russians withdraw from Ukraine. Is that correct?
Well, we need them to stop waging the war in order for the discussions to be, about something that they say it will be about something. They want to talk about our surrender. We definitely are not prepared to talk about the surrender. We have said it before this reinvasion started, that we will not give up, we will not surrender. And as soon as they wanted to talk about something, as difficult as it was, Ukraine responded and sent delegations to talk as early as March. But while we always acted in a good faith, and we're very open about what we are ready to talk about, and we were always very open about the fact that we will not discuss the surrender because this is not what we intend to do. And frankly, this is not what we can do. This is existential for us. After everything we have seen in Bucha, in Izium, in Kherson, after all the information that we know and is public now about the unprecedented proportions of war crimes and tortures and killing and rapes that Russians do to Ukrainians on the territories that they occupy, how can we surrender? We have to save every Ukrainian possible. We have to restore our country.
Clearly, Vladimir Putin is trying to pound Ukraine into giving up with all of these strikes on heating and electricity. What's the latest on those missile strikes? And can Ukrainian civilians survive this freezing winter?
Well, you're absolutely right. From February 24th, everything Russians did was not particularly moral or even acceptable during the war times, and there were missiles attacks and there were war crimes and everything else. But what we see now, as they suffer one defeat after another on the battlefield, is a full-fledged terror that they started against the civilians, not only on the territories where they occupy, but essentially everywhere. So they managed with these strikes to essentially destroy 50% of our energy system. And doing so during the time when winter was approaching, during the time when the temperatures are really low. And again, it's not just electricity, right? When you don't have electricity, you don't have access to basic to water, to sewage, you cannot bake bread because your refrigerators do not work. So it is a crime in itself to target civilian infrastructure. Now, will we be intimidated by that? I think everyone saw already that even without lights and even in the cold weather, we will not give up and we will not surrender. We all understand that it's much easier to deal with the cold than to deal with Russians. So it's very difficult. I will not be downplaying the risks. It's a huge tragedy for Ukraine. It's very difficult for civilians. It takes enormous efforts on part of Ukrainian government, Ukrainian civil society, individuals, but also our partners who are working 24/7 with us, the Department of State, Department of Energy, on getting as many generators, transformers, everything that we need now. And of course, we all doubled our efforts on the security assistance and on the weapon supplies, especially the air defense. Because on the one hand, we have to restore what is ruined, but on the other hand, we have to protect Ukraine from the future attacks, and we have to protect Ukrainians from being slaughtered everywhere in Ukraine.
Foreign Minister Kuleba said at a meeting of NATO foreign ministers that if the West and NATO countries gave Ukraine Patriot missile systems, which would protect the skies, then they wouldn't need to keep on sending generators. So he said, right now, Ukraine needs generators plus patriots. Have you had any indication, has your government had any indication that the United States is finally ready to send Patriot missile systems, the most sophisticated air defenses that you need?
Well, the NASAMS that we're receiving is also sent by the U.S. It's joint production, but U.S. is using the American taxpayers' money in order to provide them to us. We are talking about all capabilities. We are talking about the full range. And unfortunately, with the weapons, as we all learned in this war situation, that it's not something that is there on the shelves waiting to be shipped the next day. And there are there are issues with availability and with limits of what can it be. But I, want to assure that on Ukrainian part, we are discussing with everyone everything that we need, and that on the US part, there is a big willingness to work with us and try to help us with everything possible. If you look at this Ramstein meetings, which US initiated, and we already had 7 regular meetings where now more than 50 countries get together and in a closed format discuss their needs, discuss what we can do together, forge alliances, forge this groups of countries that can get something. What I can say is that we are very grateful for everything that we have received from the US, from all the support that President Biden and Congress and administration has provided us, but we need more. And I think that message has been consistent since February 24th, because we are dealing with an enemy which is not only brutal and does not have any limits to what they can do, or the moral lines that they would not cross, but also is so much larger than us. So you have a great saying in this country that it takes a village to raise a child. It will take a global village to return peace to not only Ukraine, but also globally, because the implications of this war and the implications of who will win this war, democratic and peaceful Ukraine or authoritarian, aggressive terrorist state Russia, is much bigger than just Ukraine and Russia.
Many Americans look at the situation on the ground, and despite the incredible advances Ukraine has made in taking back territory, they wonder how Ukraine can win. Russia still has missiles. It's importing more from Iran, North Korea. Can you describe what winning means, and how can Ukraine get there from where they are now?
Thank you. It's the very important question which we're discussing a lot. Like, first, it's a difficult, but it's not a difficult question at the same time, because there was peaceful Ukraine, where in 1991, and yesterday was the day when Ukraine celebrated the anniversary of the referendum that took place on the December 1st, when overwhelming more than 92% of Ukrainians voted for independence in 1991. And that's how the country was liberated from the Soviet occupation and became independent. And this is the only thing that all of us wanted, to live in our own country and decide for ourselves how we want to live in it. And we made that civilizational choice over and over during the previous centuries. And we made it on Maidan in 2014 and before, during the Orange Revolution in 2004, that we want to be independent, we want to be sovereign, we want to be peaceful, and we want to be European. And that's the only reason Russia attacked us. So this war was started by Russia. They are the ones who started the war. They are the ones who are on our territory. So it's pretty clear how the victory should look like. They should stop the war. They should get out, or we should get them out from everywhere. We should restore the territorial integrity of our country within internationally recognized borders. Then we have to return all the Ukrainians, because there are so many that they have illegally captured. There are so many that are in Russian prisons even after 2014 and 15. They have been a number of people who have been illegally detained by false charges in Crimea, for example, or in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, after which were under illegal occupation since 2014 and 15, and justice has to be served. That's why Ukraine not only opened all the criminal proceedings, and there are dozens of thousands of criminal cases in Ukraine, and we have a very solid um, uh, evidence base, but also there are court hearings in all the international courts, and Ukraine is actively discussing with all partners the international tribunal on Ukraine, because there should be justice. Everyone who's responsible for that should be taken to justice. Now, it seems like a lot to do in order to win. So how to get there? Well, first of all, weapons, 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 as our foreign minister and our president always says. We have three priorities: weapons, weapons, and weapons. Because until we restore the territorial integrity, until we defend our citizens and homes and from Russian brutal forces, we cannot move forward with that. But also sanctions. Sanctions do work. We just have to increase them, all of us together. And the unity between the United States and European Union have been essential in that. So that the meeting yesterday between the President Biden and President Macron is very important in that sense as well, because we all need to coordinate better, and we are coordinating this time much better. This is something that Putin miscalculated too, the unity of the transatlantic community on this issue. And also financial support to Ukraine. We know it's always difficult discussions why other countries, why US taxpayers should help us. But in situations like this, when it's a full-fledged war, the Russians are hitting not only the energy, but the businesses. They have destroyed so many production facilities. They blocked the Black Sea for such a long time, creating not only the food crisis for so many nations, but also damaging the export base of Ukraine and our proceeds. But again, miraculously, after 9 almost months of war, the government is still operational. The businesses in Ukraine show remarkable resiliency. The Ukrainian banking system works, and we are trying to use as much of our resources, Ukrainian resources, to continue the war, but we need support right now. So if we just stay the course with security assistance, financial assistance, and sanctions to Russia, we see that we're capable of winning on the battlefield. We see that they are retreating, and it will get us closer to the moment when victory and peace will be available. Possible.
What you're talking about, if I understand you correctly, is that Ukraine basically has to win this war on the ground.
We would really like Russia to stop the aggression and win it without winning it on the ground. But unfortunately, that's the only option on the table right now from Russia. I mean, nobody wants peace more than Ukraine. Nobody wanted to win it through diplomatic solutions more than Ukraine. But when somebody is in your home, killing and raping and destroying that home, you have to defend yourself.
Do you think that if the war drags on, the willingness of Western nations to support you economically and militarily will crack?
We really hope not. And this is something definitely Russia is hoping that it could happen. But I wouldn't even say I hope. I would say I'm pretty sure that the support will be there, because it's not just about interest, it's about values. And in this situation, as we heard from people of this great country, but also from politicians, equally from Democratic and Republican Party, that this is where the values and principles converge with American national interests. And we heard it yesterday from Senator Mitch McConnell very clearly on that topic, that it's the right thing to do. It's the only right thing to do, essentially, because if Putin get away with it, it's not going to be just Ukrainian problem. If democracies everywhere uh, will not be able to support to defend themselves from authoritarian aggressors, if Putin can do it to Ukraine and he decides to do it, because let's listen to what he says and let's believe what he says, that it's not just about Ukraine, it's about restoring the empire. He threatens other nations, he threatens other NATO countries. And if, God forbid, Article 5 is triggered because he will attack one of the NATO countries, then it's going to be much more difficult and more expensive for everyone, including the US, to defend the allies of allies partners. So, it's in a sense a very much 1939 moment when we all together have to stop Putin while his aggression is still in Ukraine. Very tragic for us, but we together can avoid the mistake that was made in 1939 and avoid a bigger war.
In World War II, the Allies invaded Germany and Hitler committed suicide in a bunker. Can you imagine, do you believe that Vladimir Putin would surrender? Many people think it would mean his demise politically or physically. So, can you imagine how this ends?
Well, Ukrainians believe in God, but we do not count on miracles in this war. We know we can only count on ourselves and on our allies and friends. So we know what we will do. We will continue defending our country. And when I say we, I mean everyone, from our brave President Zelensky to our remarkable armed forces, to our veterans, to our civilians, to doctors, citizens, all 40 million of us, to our diplomats. We all will just do everything possible and sometimes impossible to every day get that victory closer. We would be happy if it ends faster because it means less deaths and losses and damages for us. But we don't know how it will end. The only thing we know that it will end with our victory.
Many articles have been written and speeches given about the fear that Putin would do something even more horrific than he has done if he felt seriously that he was losing. Do you take the nuclear threat seriously, or do you think it's a bluff?
Well, we take all the threats seriously for obvious reasons. We cannot, whether it's a bluff or not, we cannot, we have to be prepared for. Now, will any of the serious threats make us surrender? No. This is what Putin wants all of us to feel. They want us to be afraid to the point that, we will stop fighting. And this is a typical bully behavior. Now, when we are talking about something that is so clearly in the right or wrong category, will it change what we have to do? Even if you are scared, you still have to do the right thing. And this is what we are doing, defending our homes. And this is what we ask all of our partners to continue doing, help us defend the democracy together.
Can you talk a little bit about what phase the war is in? Will Ukraine keep fighting over the winter? Can it? And what comes next?
We can and we will. Of course, that will require continuous supply of assistance. So it requires all of our partners to stay the course with us. But again, it's very clear for us, as I said before, that every day that Russians control some of our territories illegally, they are not just there. Every day they kill, torture, rape, and do something to the Ukrainians, which are occupied by them. So every day that we can liberate the territories, it's saving lives. That's why we cannot and we will not stop.
You talked before about the difficulty, if not impossibility, of negotiating with Putin. After the first invasion in 2014, those Minsk talks went nowhere. In 1994, you gave up your nuclear weapons in return for Russian security guarantees. We see where that went. So even assuming that the Russians are pushed out of your territory, what kind of security guarantees would Ukraine need in order to be sure that Russia wouldn't eventually attack again?
Thank you. Very important question, because we, as you said, the bitter lessons of 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, after we decided to give up the nuclear weapons again, because being a peaceful country is something that is so much in Ukraine's DNA. But we do not have any illusions about the Russian intent. They have been occupying us for quite a long time, whether as a Russian Empire or Soviet Union or these attempts during the past 8 years. So we understand that even after we win, there needs to be changes to the global security architecture, because clearly it didn't work to prevent the 2014 or 2022 attacks. That is why President Zelensky is talking about the Ukrainian peace plan, and he presented it at the G20 meeting. He started this discussion during his speech at the United Nations General Assembly this year. And it's a very holistic approach to how the peace not only could be achieved with getting the Russians out and getting the people back and the justice, but how we can achieve a lasting peace, how we can ensure that the food security is not going to be threatened, that the capabilities in Ukraine could be developed in order to we have our proposal, which is called the Kyiv Security Compact, which Yermak Rasmussen Group has developed, and we are discussing it on the expert level and with our partners right now. We are looking for ways how this guarantees could be structured in a kind of creative way, addressing the security and sanctions, preventing sanctions components. But ultimately, we all understand that the only ultimate security guarantees is Ukraine membership in NATO. And Ukraine membership in NATO and Ukraine membership in the European Union is something that is not only all Ukrainians believe and fight on the battlefield for. This is where our future is. This transatlantic integration has been very important for us. It's also already is in Ukrainian constitution. And, just 30 years of independence after, a massive propaganda during the Soviet times was enough for people to realize what European Union and NATO is about. And for us, it's return to who we actually are, not joining some new alliances for us. So it's a very complex question, of course, and it will require a lot of discussions, which are ongoing actually as we speak. But I think it's very clear for all of us that we have to address the issue not only of how to ensure that Ukraine is going to be secured after we win this war, but what do we have to do in general to restore the global security infrastructure?
I'm turning to a question here. Do you believe, or do you worry, rather, that the new Congress in the United States, with many GOP members who oppose continued aid to Ukraine, can create problems for Ukraine? And do you worry that President Trump, who was not very friendly to Ukraine, might be reelected?
Well, look, both our countries are democracies. It's not the most difficult, the most easy systems, but these are the best systems to have. So in a democracy, people have the best possible way to influence the politicians, elect the politicians, change them on the regular basis. This is something that we are fighting for in Ukraine right now. And I'm so happy that we have support of American people, and we have support from Congress on a very strong bipartisan basis. So we have that support from Democrats and we have that support from Republicans. And there could be different opinions and there could be different concerns. And some of them could be valid concerns. And we are ready to respond to them and talk to people. But I do not have, I'm not afraid that the United States will stop supporting us. Because as we saw in the recent poll, more than 70% of American people think that US have to support us, and they realize that this is a fight for values. This is fight for the same common values that our countries have. This is essentially a fight for democracy, freedom, independence. This is what this country is built on. This fight is so clearly about injustice that has been done to us. And also from the national security perspective, it's so important for the United States that Ukraine wins in this battle and Russia is defeated. Because if, again, an autocratic, aggressive regime, a nuclear country, a member of the Security Council of the UN, can attack a peaceful country that was never a threat and not be punished for that, not be defeated in that absolutely unprovoked and illegal war that they have started, just imagine what are the implications for the global security infrastructure. We all want to live in a much safer world. We all want our children to live in a much safer world. So for the sake of our children, all of our children, Ukrainian, American, European, African, we have to win in this war.
Another question, do you believe that this war can be ended so long as Vladimir Putin remains in power?
Well, it's, unfortunately, it's not only Putin's war. Unfortunately, we see the majority of Russians supporting this war. So whether we win it, now or in a couple of months, or who's going to lead the Russia, again, it's up for Russian people who do they want to lead them. They have to decide for themselves. But most importantly, they also have to decide what do they want for their own children. Do they want the whole world to be afraid of them? And do they want to be isolated even more because that's what's going to happen to them? Or they want at some point to try to become members or part of the civilized world. So, again, unfortunately, and we tried to talk to so many Russians and we tried to get information to Russia, and we saw that it's not unfortunately only the brainstorming or the lack of the information. Even when they have the information, it's very difficult to see what they're doing in Bucha and Izium, and it's not very difficult to understand that it's them who attacked us, and still we do not see massive protests, and still we see so many of Russians supporting this war. So it's very sad and tragic, and they are actually destroying their own future with that. And hopefully, at some point, they will wake up and do something about it.
Can you see this war dragging on for years?
We really hope not, but it's already dragging on for 8 years. So yes, this full-fledged phase that started by Russians on 24th is there for 9 months, but we are in that stage of the war, and they attacked us, and they are on Ukrainian soil since 2014. So we pray and fight and do everything to end this faster. And the more support and weapons we can get, the faster we can get to peace. And again, because it's with our people on our territory, nobody wants to stop this destruction more than we do.
Here's a question that I think is very important. So many Americans want to help, and they're not sure how. And one viewer says, I donate to World Kitchen, but where else can we donate for food and for weapons? What legitimate organizations? Does the embassy have a list of organizations that it has vetted that provide ways for Americans to send money for food, for generators, for whatever? I certainly would like to publish items from that list if it exists.
As a matter of fact, we do. And thank you for asking that question. And I would like to thank all Americans who helped us. Every support matters. And we are so grateful for all of that support, whether it's donations or in-kind contributions, or writing to your senator, congressman, or joining us at rallies and protests, or just simply helping some Ukrainians who live close by, or putting the flag on your house, which again is so important. It touches me every time I see a Ukrainian flag somewhere in Washington DC or in other parts. Every sign of support means a lot to us, and it is very appreciated. Now, we do have United 24 platform, which was started by President Zelensky, through which you can donate directly to some of the ministries and programs, and there is a extensive reporting there. We do have the First Ladies Fund that works on the humanitarian items. We do have Ukraine House here in Washington, D.C., and it's also a non-for-profit organization. So you can go through that. We would be happy to share, and it's on the embassy website. We have this, and there are a number of very reliable Ukrainian American non-for-profits which are actively working in Ukraine, including the World Central Kitchen, who are amazing. What they do in Ukraine in the areas, they're always as close as they can get, even to the battlefield, feeding people. So every support is important. We'll send you the link to the page on our site. And also I would encourage everyone, if you have any questions, please use the embassy and our general consulates. We have one in San Francisco, in Chicago, in New York, in Houston, as a resource. Reach out, ask all your questions. We will try to be as responsive as possible.
And I will publish that link and describe what it's about. And also, let me ask you, this is a big question, but I don't want to leave our discussion without touching on it. This week was the anniversary of the Holodomor, the forced famine caused by Stalin when he repressed successful peasants, took their grain and left them to starve. And approximately 4 million of them in Ukraine died of hunger. Talk to us just a bit about how the memory of the Holodomor affects how Ukrainians look at this war and affects their determination to keep fighting.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very sad anniversary this year. And it's a true crime, this genocide that Soviet Russia committed against Ukraine in 1932 and 33. And then there was another wave of Holodomor in 46. It had a profound effect on Ukraine. Not only Ukrainians were starved to death, not only they were killed by millions. There were days when when dozens of thousands of people were dying per hour. And we also could not bury them. And the Ukrainians for 2 generations were denied even the memory of that. When I was in school, my grandmother would whisper about Holodomor to me, but it was not allowed to talk about it. People could be criminally punished for even trying to talk about Holodomor or about the people that they lost. And the reason for Holodomor, it's not because we didn't have the wheat, it's not because there was bad harvest. The reason for Holodomor was that years before it was organized, specifically the eastern and central and southern Ukraine did not want to join collective farms. It was after Ukraine had independence for for just less than a 3 year in 1918, and did not want to be occupied by Russia, and fought after that the successful farmers who just wanted to live peacefully on their land, and they didn't want to join the collective farms. And that's why the Holodomor was organized, in order to destroy this resistance and craving of the independence. And it's very similar to what we see now. After Ukraine regained independence in 1991 and started building our own country, our own institutions, and firmly started moving towards the European Union and to returning to our European family, this is when Russia again attacked us. So very similar. So on the one hand, the pattern is there, and we know what Russians are doing to us. And this is one of this memory about Holodomor, and the fact that we grieve and mourn all the lives that we have lost and all the lives that were not born because of that, also gives us a clear vision and strength to fight now, because we know that that's what will happen to us if we allow the occupation again happen everywhere in Ukraine. So, we are, we are very glad that more countries recognize it as a genocide, because this is what it was. We have to, and we will always remember it. And we will always remember it as in never again remembrance. We will remember, and we will do everything possible to prevent that happening. We see it happening now in the places where Russia occupies, but we will not stop until we liberate all Ukraine.
Before you have to leave, I just want to return briefly to the situation of the war as it stands now. This war that Ukrainians believe is existential and are determined to win. For a long time, it seems as if the Allies and the United States were willing to give Ukraine enough weapons so that it would not lose, so that Russia could not win. But they were not willing to give sufficient weapons so that Ukraine could actually defeat Russia. I was in Ukraine in the first 3 weeks of July, and I saw the situation shift just in that time period with the arrival of HIMARS, these precision missiles that could destroy weapons depots behind Russian lines. Do you believe that the Allies, including the US, finally recognize that Ukraine must win? Or do you think that they are still operating on the premise that they're fighting to keep Ukraine from losing, but not to win?
Well, we hear very clearly, and again, we see it in deeds from the United States, their readiness and willingness to be with us as long as it takes, which for us means as long as it takes to win. And we have been very clear about what is it about for us. Now, you have to understand, if you go back in time, even to the beginning of this full-fledged invasion, and you listen to all the experts, what they were saying, people were debating how soon the Kyiv would fall. The majority of people did not believe we would fight like we are fighting, and it's the majority of the experts. It's the majority of the people who influence the policy and everything else. We kept saying we will defend our country, we will not surrender, we will not give up. But in a democracy, any government has to listen and has to get all the information, and the majority of the information about Ukraine, not only during the past 30 years, but during the previous centuries, have been poisoned by Russian propaganda. So many institutions were set up by Russians. So many universities had the Russian programs that did not really study what Russia is about. But, on the boards of these institutions and the cultural centers, we had the oligarchs and the people who are behind this invasion now. So we see the evolution of the understanding And we see that how these ideas, which estimated Russia and underestimated Ukraine, are not the mainstream right now. And that allows, I think, the policymakers, and I'm not only talking about the US, but about so many other countries, to get more correct information and advice and discussions. Because again, in a democracy, this is what you take into account. This is what you rely on. So we all together have still a very large road ahead of us on differentiating between the information and propaganda. Because Russia, in addition to this war in Ukraine on the battlefield, is conducting an information war and cyber war against Ukraine, but against all of us. So, I know that, again, American people and American leadership knows what the stakes are in this war, and we hear it loud and clearly that we have to win. And our strategic friend, I wouldn't even call a partner or ally, but strategic friend, is with us in this. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean that there will be, on a number of occasions, the information or disinformation campaigns by Russians. When they blocked the Black Sea, they tried to convince all the nations, the global South, that it's because of the war and because of Ukraine there are shortages. And we together were able to show that no, Ukraine is as ready to export. We're trying to do it. We're even donating grain. The President Zelensky's initiative, Grain from Ukraine, which was supported by a number of allies and supported by the United States, which allocated 20 million to support the shipment of this grain. And we have been very clear and successful in essentially getting the message across. We have to keep doing it. We have to keep working on it. We have to keep rediscovering the true history of Ukraine. There is a lot of work that we are doing with museums, for example, here, with universities, and we have to do more of it. That altogether will enable the policymakers also to do more. Because and the more still has to be done. We still need more capabilities. We still need more sanctions in order to get to peace quicker.
Thank you so much for adding to clarity, and we wish you good luck going forward. And thank you very much to the audience. You will be hearing about the next Inquirer Live, and I'm very happy that we could have this discussion with the ambassador. Bye for now.